neighborhood. The Commission has expressed its view that it is for the benefit of the economies and for the support of reform to have that free flow of people that would allow them to learn, engage, and also for a more accelerated integration of policies in these countries. And it is now a matter of discussion further in the Council. And then let me go to the really most significant subject that so many of you have brought forward, and it is migration. First, we have to be clear on understanding what is happening in the world that's around us. And what is happening in the world that's around us is that the combination of violent extremism and the spread of very bad terrorist-minded groups on a territory that has expanded, plus climate change and its demonstrable power, plus population growth, high population growth in parts of the world that can least sustain that growth, is leading to massive displacements. We talk a lot about the 1.5 million people that have already come to Europe. We need to talk also about the 59 million people that have not come to Europe but are displaced very often from one poor country to another. That process of displacement has no signals of abating anytime soon. If you look at the continent of Africa, Boko Haram in northern Nigeria down to Cameroon, then you go to Central African Republic and Sudan devastated by conflicts, then we go down to Somalia with Al-Shabaab, and then up to Syria, Iraq, Libya with the so-called Islamic State, and then Yemen being teared apart, and then Mali still facing very serious difficulties. This is generating a massive displacement. The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, in addition tells us that climate change is likely by 2025 to displace 100 million people. In this context, it is very important that we in Europe build our policy in this regard in a way that addresses first the root causes of migration in a more determined manner. Secondly, it takes into account the criticality of us being able to protect our external borders and to know who is coming to Europe. As some of you said, to be able to separate those who are genuine asylum seekers that are running from the flares and dangers of war from those who are looking to Europe for a chance to find a better life opportunity for their children. And finally, those that are coming with the intention to kill our people. And that requires, obviously, for us to work on all these fronts. And this is what we are doing in the Commission. This is what we are doing with our member states. First, we are significantly increasing investments where people currently are, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, but also in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in places where displacements take root. We are significantly increasing our investment in development in areas that are most fragile, and I want to complement what the UK has done recently by deciding that 50% of the resources of DFID should go in situations of fragility, and I believe we all have to follow suit on that. Secondly, we are building a better system to protect our borders, but also to manage asylum across the European Union in a more harmonious manner. We simply cannot have 28 different systems. We have to harmonize them, and this is what we will be pursuing as proposals Commission in this year. On the border control, I appreciate the comments that have been made supporting the proposal. Of course, it is for us to work together. It is not for Commission to take an upper hand on that. It is for us to be stronger in the face of what is and will continue to be a very significant challenge. But finally, we need our solidarity, we need our unity, and we need to save Schengen. Because a Europe that is again being broken up by borders is not the Europe that we want our children to live in. I lived on the other side of the Iron Curtain. I remember these days. It was not a good time for Europe. When I crossed, Mr. Chair, when Bulgaria joined the European Union, and I crossed the border, it was at Frankfurt Airport, with my passport going through for EU member states line, I cried. And it is of course hugely important for our economy to stay together. We forget how strong the European Union is with 20% of GDP in the world produced by us together. We forget that together we can be the most equitable region in the world. We are, well, inequalities in some of our member states have grown, and this is dangerous. Together we can bring that down. Together we can be a prosperous region. So for this reason, in the Commission, we take our responsibility. I'm sorry, I got carried away. I apologize for that. We take our responsibility to our people, to our union, very, very seriously. Thank you, and my apologies. For my benefit, I was disciplined the first time around.
You were certainly very disciplined the first round, Ms. Georgieva. Thank you very much. Mr. Koenders, the floor is yours.
I'll try to be very disciplined as the Vice President, who is always very disciplined. Let me go quickly into a few very specific comments that have been made, because I think a lot has been said by the Commissioner. Let me say something from the point of view of the Presidency. First of all, questions regarding terror and insecurity. I think the key at the stage where we're right now in the Presidency on all of this is, again, to work on implementation. It sounds a little bit boring, as if we have no vision on this. Of course, the issue of terror and the complex origins of terror is a complicated one. But I think we have made the steps as to in what direction we want to move in terms of de-radicalization, in terms of prevention, in terms of working in the fabrics of our European societies, with schools, with imams, with prisons. But at the same time also, except for prevention, work on issues that relate to, unfortunately but necessary, repression. The issue of cooperation between law enforcement agencies, between border control agencies, filling also the gaps that we still see, for instance, in the real intelligence sharing in Europol or Interpol. I found out a few weeks ago that when you really get all the professionals together on this, so the politicians and the professionals, that you can actually move forward in reducing the threat that we're all faced with. In the end, it is the strengths of our societies that can fight terror the best. But we need very operational, preventative and repressive measures in order to reduce, for instance, the amount of foreign fighters that are still leaving Europe for countries in the Middle East. And I think the European Union and during our presidency, we're really geared towards this, ensure that the right people are working together to implement what has been agreed upon this issue. And let's not forget that we constantly anticipate also the next steps. If you look to ISIL or Daesh or other organizations, you constantly see that they're in fact an octopus, a very complex animal that can constantly change strategy and tactics, often quicker than national governments can do. It's not impossible, but it means that this force of anticipation is important. But it's a complex issue, and we need to work on all these issues at the same time, and implementation there is key. The same goes for cybersecurity. where some of the questions were raised. I cannot go into the details right now, but again there I think both the Commission as well as the Council are looking at that not only in a very detailed way, but also in the context of the fact that Europe as a whole should have a stronger common foreign and security policy. That's why we had this weekend also the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense together in Amsterdam to talk specifically on these types of threats that we have, hybrid warfare, cybersecurity. And it involves much more than we think working with other actors, not only the politicians and the parliamentarians, but also, for instance, the private sector. The same goes, by the way, on the, the prevention of terrorism. If you look to the ways that at the moment payments are being done, or there is a relationship between common crime and some of the extreme jihadist circles that we know, then that is exactly where the entry points are to make sure that we are effective in what we are trying to do. On the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, let me just say that I would agree with what has been said regarding the not pushing this issue to the back burner. Of course, all our attention at a day-to-day level is now what is happening exactly in Syria. There was correctly a question on this. What is happening to the new offensive of Assad and of the Russians in regions that lead to an enormous flow of new refugees towards the border? That these are key issues, but let's not forget that also the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the status quo, is simply not sustainable. And therefore we have looked again this week to what extent, probably in completely new formulas than we have seen so far, we can at least move forward. There is now a different relationship with the Arab world and Israel. There is also a different relationship between the Arab world and the Palestinian Authority, divided as they are themselves between Gaza and Ramallah. But let me assure you that at least from my point of view, and I know also from the High Representative Federica Mogherini, this is an issue that we are not forgetting because we think other things are more important. I think if you look to the risks of further radicalization there and the day-to-day violence, we simply don't have the luxury to do so. On visa liberalization, I can just, I think, support what the Commissioner has said. Visa liberalization is important for people. It gives them the benefit to travel, to engage, to make the European connections more deep. At the same time, we know obviously that always, there are good rules around this when you can do that. It's conditions-based, not time-based. You have to have the proper security and rules in place. And I think in that context, we would like to move forward on this. And the same goes for enlargement. Of course, I'm aware of the fact that at some point, I think the Commissioner said we're not going to enlarge in the next 5 years. And the absorption capacity of the Union as a whole is also limited. I see every day that we have quite strong connections and discussions with countries, especially in the Western Balkans that you mentioned on these issues. Serbia and the opening of chapters. I think there are efforts of Bosnia-Herzegovina to put forward their candidacy in the upcoming period. Of course, it is always based, I think that's good, on fair and rigorous conditionality and the principle of own merits. And in the end, the pace of negotiations is determined always by the candidate's own progress on fundamental reforms, in particularly in the key areas of rule of law and fundamental rights. But I think in that context, our politics has to be what we call strict and fair. Of course, there is a calling, a European calling for many of the countries, and we see already, in fact, that in the day-to-day management of our work now, there is a very close relationship with the Western Balkans. And brings me, obviously, to the issue that many of you have mentioned around migration. Let me just be clear, I don't know how much time I have there because there's so much to be said about it, but the key here is that the European Union as such has basically put forward a policy which consists of 4 elements, and they're all conditioned for the others. You cannot take only one and then do the others. First, it's very complex, so the key is working. We know all that. I won't go into the details, although it's very important on Syria and on what's happening also in Afghanistan and Iran, 3 countries where by far the majority of those people who seek refugee are coming from. And we can discuss that, obviously. The second is really to ensure in all national and in the European Parliament, that what we want in terms of stability in the region, a partnership with Jordan and Lebanon, but also with other countries, a real support for Turkey, which is taking up more than 2 million refugees, in a very effective and operational way is key. Otherwise people will simply move. We know this. We can close our eyes for this. The third is effective border control. I think we all agree on that. We can go into the details. I just want to mention that in each of your countries, look at how many people are actually going for Frontex and EASO. Are they really delivering, your national governments and your parliaments, for what has been promised? You cannot have a Schengen, which is so key for our economy and our future and our freedom of travel, if there is not this effective external border control. And the presidency is working basically day and night on this to make this happen. And the last point is not least. Yes, it is solidarity in Europe. It is not that some countries can say we have nothing to do with it. You can find all kinds of coalitions about the way this works, if it's voluntary or not, if we can come to a resettlement program, if we take into account that different countries have different histories, it's all fine. But this can only be worked on if we do it together, and that's what I, as a presidency, call on you as well, to assist in a very much implementation of decisions that have already been taken, including the one on the Coast Guard.
Thank you very much, Minister Koenders. And then I have to ask your patience, because Ms. Georgieva reminded me that she forgot to answer one question and she wants to very briefly have the floor. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Apologies for coming back, but it was a question on what concretely we do with financial instruments to help our people, especially in terms of social measures. We have a budget on an annual basis. This year it's 145 billion euros in payments, and we have front-loaded in this budget 1 billion for the Youth Employment Initiative. This is specifically targeted to our young people out of jobs. We have been very much expanding the funding that comes from the EU budget for SMEs and programs that generate particularly jobs in SMEs, including those that are related to energy efficiency, building insulation programs that give opportunities for SMEs to be engaged, because we know that this is the biggest generator of jobs. We are looking at the budget from the perspective of making sure that payments go quickly to member states, so that can be a balancing factor for the national budgets. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, Vice President, and thank you, Minister, for your time to share with us your vision on the work program of the European Commission and the priorities of the Dutch presidency of the European Council. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, our meeting has come to an end. We are only less than 15 minutes behind schedule, so I want to thank all participants for your discipline. It made my chairmanship of this meeting an easy task. We have discussed the EU scrutiny within our committees and interparliamentary cooperation, and we also reviewed the work program of the European Commission and the priorities of the Dutch presidency, and you have given us your valuable input from your parliamentary priorities. We hope you consider this meeting as a good start of the parliamentary dimension of the presidency of the Netherlands, as well as a thorough preparation of the plenary COSAC meeting of 12, 13 and 14 June 2016. Of course, we hope to see you all again this meeting and perhaps already earlier at one of our other interparliamentary meetings. On behalf of my colleague Malik Asmani and myself, I would like to thank you very much, all the participants of this meeting, for their active role in creating a lively debate. This goes for the members of parliament, but of course also for their supporting staff. Aside these people, I would like to thank the civil servants who assisted in organizing this event, including all interpreters. You might have noticed a lot of enthusiastic youngsters aiding us in making this COSAC Chairs meeting a great success today. A special thanks goes out to the students of the Hague University of Applied Sciences who have volunteered to do this. They truly have been a tremendous help during the conference. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Dear colleagues, before I invite you all to have lunch with us, I ask you a mere 30 seconds more of your precious time for a brief visual flashback of this meeting, please. For now, we would very much like to invite you to have lunch with us, which is waiting for us in the other room. And I wish you a pleasant remainder of your day and a safe trip home. Thank you very much.